I found myself reading religious texts, sacred texts, to educate myself about other people's religions and religious beliefs. I think that there's wisdom in all sorts of sacred texts and all sorts of literature that was printed before my birth. And so I've, for instance, read Stephen Mitchell's modern translations of the Gospels according to Jesus. And I was working with this patient who was a priest who was very frightened of dying. He was frightened of death. He wasn't sure whether, in fact, God existed or whether there was an afterlife. And I recalled in my reading of the Gospels according to Jesus that there was an event in the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus became quite frightened about the fact that he was going to be crucified and died, and in fact had a moment of fear and asked God to not have him go through this death, take this cup away from me. And so I reminded this priest of that particular story. I asked him if he was aware of that story. Obviously he was, and we talked about it. And he said to me afterwards, he said, well, I guess if Jesus, the Son of God, could be afraid of death, then I guess I can be too. And so that was particularly helpful to him.
And there was just that recent, it was Saint, the Indian nun who was
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa
revealed that she, in fact,
had her own doubts in that regard.
Absolutely. Right, absolutely.
So faith is not absolute.
Faith is not absolute, and meaning is not absolute either. When you look at the secular component of spirituality, what seems to be critical in terms of meaning is not finding meaning, but the search for meaning. As long as you keep moving towards meaning, that seems to be more critical than absolutely finding it.
In the conflict, though, between religious cultures or not, how does the therapist deal with the patient who comes to him or her extremely troubled for religious reasons? That is, troubled to the point of becoming a disability, troubled because of religious beliefs and reasons over his homosexuality.
Well, I think that's a...
How do you deal with the homosexuality issue without negating the religious precept that led him to his problem?
That's a very complex and difficult issue. It's not one that I actually have a lot of experience with. But I think what it does bring up for me is are the limitations of a psychiatrist working with religious issues. We, in fact, are not experts on religion. We're experts on the mind and the body and the secular component of the spirit. And so I think there are times where it's critically important to involve our colleagues in chaplaincy and clergy, because I think there are issues that are clearly out of our domain. A real religious crisis for an individual is probably, if that's truly what it's about, is probably one in which I think a reasonable psychiatrist, no matter how comfortable they might feel with existential or spiritual, even religious issues, would probably turn to a religious colleague to try to involve them in that particular situation.
Is there anything that the Academy of Psychosomatic Medicine then is doing to encourage more communication, dialogue with clergy, either at a national or local level?
I don't believe
about these kinds of
I don't believe the
dilemmas?
Academy is doing very much about that. I think
should they?
Well, I think this particular meeting, whose theme is exploring the mind-body-spirit connection, I think for one of the first times has a great deal of content within the program in which there's focus on existential issues, spiritual issues, interventions that utilize existential and spiritual components, concepts of meaning, concepts of dignity that are utilized in clinical intervention. But I think that as we start to explore these types of interventions, and as psychiatrists who are working at the interface of medicine and psychiatry and starting to develop these sort of existential or spiritually based interventions, I think there's much more of an opportunity for us to collaborate and cooperate with our colleagues in chaplaincy. I participated in a symposium on natural theology at the Duke Divinity School about 6 months ago, and there was great interest amongst chaplaincy teachers, people who direct chaplaincy programs, educational programs, to learn some of these interventions because they see them as being quite related to their body of work as well. And so I think the future holds promise for more collaboration. I think it's probably premature for the Academy to push that agenda at this particular point, but I think at some point those of us in particular, members of the Academy who work in this particular specific domain, I know that we'll probably do that.